Hey guys, welcome back. This is an interesting episode because I'm going to bring in Combine into the complete fold of things which we were doing, which is the Codes app, which is right now built using UIKit, Swift, and all its clauses and protocols. We are going to replace it with Combine so that you get functional reactive programming into the complete set of things which we were doing right now. This is interesting because I was a big fan of RX Swift before, at least when I was working with iOS applications. One of the things or one of the issues with RX Swift is that whoever is adopting it, let's say, they have to have at least a little bit of understanding of how reactive programming works even before they can maybe onboard themselves to that programming style, which is completely different from a paradigm shift from the functional programming which you are used to in, let's say, Swift. Another problem with, let's say, RX Swift is that it is bringing itself as an external library within the project and increasing at least the size of the bundle which you are building. And also there is a community which is also building many of its dependent features. If you also start including that into your project, then can imagine it's going to be a bigger project, and that brings in a little bit of self-doubt and to convince, at least it's difficult to convince the overall developer community which is also working, or at least the team which is working with you, to adopt this for your project. But then because it is coming outside of the overall ecosystem of Apple. But then as soon as Combine comes in, which is right now part of the overall ecosystem, it becomes easier because that at least gives a roadmap of where Apple is taking the iOS development for the future, and then you can at least convince all of your team, or at least your leads, that this is where it is leading to, and this is the right time to maybe onboard yourself to this programming style. It's easier to start building your application using the available elements of Combine, let's say a future, or maybe current value publisher, or even a PassThrough Subject. Any of this is already available with you, using which you can already start building your application. If not, let's say you have to extend some of the features or some of the elements in UIKit, it's easier to do that using a couple of implementations which is available using a subscriber and a publisher, which you need to conform to build your own custom publishers for your UIKit element. So that's something we'll also look into. So I guess with this context, it's a good time to get started. So let's get started. So the context for this episode is very straightforward, that we are going to move all of these delegates and maybe all of the closures which we had created towards Combine. That's what we are going to do. So we have at many places there is a closure over here, and there are delegates available over here. And on save, if you have to make it more reactive, we might have to modify to something else. That something else I'll bring in pretty soon enough. So without much delay, I'm gonna get started with whatever we need to do right now, which is again to modify this as per whatever is needed in Combine. So to start with, let's start with the codes DB. I'm gonna include I don't think we need core data import here, because anyway we have moved it outside of import outside of the, it's anyway inside the database, so I don't need there is no need of that import. So we are going to include Combine right now. So some of the things which we are going to change right now is we are going to modify this delegate into something else. And to start with, I am going to introduce an enum which is going to be called as database response. So we already have something called as a database response available within the codes core database. We called it a product. We made it as a protocol, so we have it as an array database response. Instead, I'm just going to convert this protocol into an enum. I'll tell you why. pretty soon enough, but let's understand what is going to happen here. So instead of this, we are going to have this begin updates, end updates, and insert all of these three as a database enum, response enum. So I'm going to call this as begin updates. These are enums, so I can just keep like cases, end updates, and we also have an insert case. So that's going to be insert using, so I can just call it index path. Index path. So for index path, I think it needs to have UIKit. I don't know whether foundation will work. Let me try that once. Yep, even foundation works. So I can just keep it as these two imports, and this is the change which has happened, which is called as database response. So I'm going to start changing this delegate into something called as I'm going to call it as a pass-through subject. So there are a couple of things which are available with Combine. One is called a CurrentValue Subject and a pass-through, and the second one is a pass-through subject. There is a difference between the usage of these two, so maybe I can just make this a pass-through subject first. Pass-through subject, and it's going to be of type the database response which I created. So it's not going to be this codes database response, which is nothing but inheriting from the array database response. I'm just going to get rid of that right now and going to make it a pass-through subject. So I can just maybe create it as a, I'm also not going to call it a delegate. Instead, I'm just going to call it as database response subject. Let's get rid of this one. And I'm just going to keep it as a getter. I don't need to set anything. Okay. Okay, so if you see, there are a couple of things which we need to take care here. Which one is generic type pass-through subject specialized with too few parameters. So I have only included one parameter right now. It needs a couple of parameters. So one of the things which we might have add here is something called as a never, which is like it can accept either a response, success response type, or a failure type. So it ideally should be a failure type as the second parameter for, let's say, a pass-through subject. I can call it as never. That means it is never going to error out. So in reactive programming, it works like reactive programming. It works like if you have a signal, let's say if you're sending a signal across through a subscriber, if a publisher sends signals to a subscriber, then it can happen like it can keep sending the signal indefinitely, or it can end as soon as you, let's say, call a complete. Signal works like that. It can indefinitely start sending signals through a publisher, and a subscriber will receive that at the other end. It can keep receiving that, but then as soon as an error condition occurs, then we can stop sending that. So that's how the subscription mechanism works. So in this case, I'm just saying that it's never going to have an error case, but just that it's going to keep sending the signals as long as let's say this, whichever instance is subscribed, implementing this codes DB. In our case, it's a database, has an instance available. So it's going to keep sending value to whichever is subscribing to. So in our case, it's a view controller which is subscribed to all the changes which is happening on the database side. So that's the reason I'm going to keep one parameter which is an enum, which we defined right now. where you can keep getting a begin update call and end update call, as well as an insert, which is going to go through this pass-through subject. So that is one. Pass-through subject is something available along with Combine. So it just broadcasts the downstream to the subscribers. All the downstream subscribers, it's going to send those elements. So like I said, there are two things in available, at least, which we are going to use. One is this current value subject, and the second one is a pass-through subject. So difference being, let's say for a pass-through subject, we don't need to set an initial value, and the other part, the other aspect of a pass-through subject is that let's say as soon as you subscribe to a pass-through subject, then you are not going to receive the last saved state, or at least the last available signal within that. Example being, let's say if you want to use a publisher which is going to send the user information, it's very important in an application to have those user tokens. Let's say if you want to keep a token and you keep the sending those updated latest token to anything which is subscribed to this token information, then it becomes the responsibility of the publisher to at least give the last value to the subscribed element. So at least in this case, if let's say a subscriber who wants to maybe make an API call needs that token to be available, then if you need to make that available every time something subscribe to it, subscribe to this token information, then in that case you need to use something called as a current value subject. That means that is going to replay the last value which is there available with that publisher. So that is one use case where you are going to use a current value subject. But let's say there are scenarios where you don't need, as soon as you subscribe, you don't need something like an information coming out from the publisher. Example being a button tap event. So it's not necessary that as soon as you subscribe to a button, it starts sending the last button tap which has happened to you. It need not happen. So you can only maybe listen to that tap as and when it is happening, and not like you need to understand the history of how many taps happened or what was the last tap which you need to listen to. That is not a requirement. So these are the different use cases where you are going to use a current value subject as well as a pass-through subject. So I just wanted to maybe give a clarity around what and when are we going to use that. So in this case, in this specific case, we are going to use a pass-through subject because we are only interested in maybe sending that broadcast information. In this case, it's a database response. So as and when there is a response or at least something happens on the database side is when we are interested in maybe pulling that information. So that's the reason I am keeping it as pass-through subject. But there are instances where I might use a current value subject, but not at least in this scope at least. So that's one change which I am going to bring in, which is this having this pass-through subject. Whatever we had as delegate here is modified now as a pass-through subject, which is accepting a couple of parameters. One is this database response, which can be either a begin update, end update, as well as the insert. And the second one is a failure case. So this is a success case and a failure case. So failure case, in my case at least, I don't need to send a failure case at all. So I'm just going to keep it as never. That means it's never going to give an error response. So that's something as a change I have done right now. So let's do those changes wherever it is impacting right now. So it's already giving me this delegate is not available. So that's good. That's a good way to start. So instead of this delegate right now, we have something called as a database response subject. So I don't need to set this right now. All that I need to maybe do is that I receive that signal. So the subject, I can call something called as a sync to receive that data. So a couple of things can happen. Either I can receive a completion callback which anywhere in this case it is never, so we are not going to receive any error in our case. So I don't need to really listen to that never case where I'm not anyway expecting to receive any failure cases. And I also can receive something called as the other part, which is a success case, which is the database response. So maybe I'll just modify this. So sync is the function call which you need to make to start receiving. This is the subscription which we are doing right now on this subject, so that you start receiving the changes happening on the database on the view controller side. So who is the subscriber here? It is a view controller who is subscribing to this subject. So in this case, if you see, I have just set up one subject which is doing both the things, like even receiving the value as well as sending the values. So here in this case, I can send those signals or the elements through this PassThrough Subject database response, and I can start receiving those signals through this response of subject itself. So I can do that using a subscription which is called using a sync, and I can get that response over here. And this is not enough. It will still give you an error because we are not yet subscribed. We still need to do the memory management. So it is saying results of call is unused. So we should not be doing whatever I am right now doing, because this is actually holding this this instance here itself, and we are going to have a memory leak. So to avoid this, Combine is providing us a pattern, which is the cancelable pattern, which we need to, at least we don't need to implement it, but then we can create a cancelable subscribers. I can call it cancelables, and then I can create a set of those cancelables. So I don't have an import of, I don't even need a import of core data here, because this is still left over from the first episode, the dirty way. That's the reason it's still existing. We don't have any reference of core data in the view controller anymore. So even if you remove it, it's going to work, because everything is abstracted, at least within our the database layer which we have created. So whatever I'm going to bring in here is Combine, and then I can call the cancelables. So I can call it any cancelable and instantiate that over here. So this can now be used to hold all the instances of the subscriptions which we have created right now. So I can just say store in a set of cancelable, and then just associate that. So this will make sure that, so I need to have it as var. That's the reason it's giving an error. So that should be fine. So if we will start receiving the responses over here now. So that's one change we have already done, where we modified the call over here. So maybe let's keep a print over here. Maybe I can create a switch itself for this receiving this response, because it's an enum, and I can really start receiving those responses over here. So it will ask me to implement those. So begin updates, end updates, and insert using index path. So these things we will just modify it after this change. So we already have this database response here. I'm going to get rid of that so that we can move these calls to its corresponding place within this subscription. So I think there is one more error which we need to fix. So codes DB, PassThrough Subject. I think it's still not implemented. That's the reason. So let's go back and implement, because we are not started sending any signals to the other layer yet. So it's now asking me to implement that. So I think we already have a delegate here which we need to get rid of. So instead of that, it will be using this where this part. So I can just maybe delete this one. use this PassThrough subject. It needs import of combine, and that should be fine. So whatever call which was happening from, let's say, this delegate, we are going to get rid of that. So I don't want this delegate begin updates, end updates, and the inserts which are happening around here is going to get modified with it's already giving some other error. That's because we are not instantiated this PassThrough subject. Did we? Okay, let's instantiate that PassThrough subject. It does not need an initial value, so I can just really instantiate it like this. So that's done. So I can get rid of this. First thing first, let's go and get rid of this database codes database response. I don't need this protocol anymore because I'm going to use the other delegate, or at least the enum for that. So I also got rid of now the weak var delegate as well, and I'm going to use this database response instead. So it's already giving error, which I can maybe replace right away. I'm just gonna do a change here. Delete begin updates is going to be dot. I just need to send a value now. So input has to be, it's needing a begin update. So you know that this database response is going to accept a database response type, which we know has these three cases which we have added. That's what I'm right now passing here. So begin update is going to send an enum of begin updates. End updates is going to send an enum of end updates. Send dot end updates, and over here I'm going to have the other part, which is database response subject dot send insert. I can just pass the index path. So that's it. Those are the changes. I think pretty much it's not going to give me only this error because I deleted this delegate right now, and we are already taking care of the begin updates, end updates within the view controller. We are not yet doing that, but we need to do that. So I'm going to get rid of this extension right now, which is there in the codes view controller. I'm going to get rid of that, and instead I'm going to go back here where we were receiving those and then do those here. So table view, I need to receive, so I need to maybe keep a weak self, or even I can pass a table view as a closure parameter, and then I can call the begin update over here, and table view dot end updates over here, and finally I can call the table view dot insert rows at index path. So I'm already receiving the index path dot with the same thing like fade. So we have taken care of this part right now. So one of the things, I might just move this because otherwise your view did load is going to get bloated with so many of these calls. So better we move it to an extension. I'm going to create an extension for this codes view controller. Maybe keep it private, and then I'm just going to create a function called setup binding, then have the have that here. So I'm just going to move that code database subscription codes over there. That's it, and then make sure that we have that called over here, setup binding. That's it. So ideally we should start receiving our callbacks through this as soon as an insert happens. Let's see whether we get these callbacks, because I think we have connected this bit at least on our code base. So I'm going to run that. So we need to insert a code to see that working. So I'm going to start with code from Wish live. I'm just going to say, is combine working? add. It came, so you can see it's already, the subscription system is already working for you. Begin update happened and it's going to insert. I guess end update has to happen post that, so it does not at least we are making sure that there is no unnecessary reload, and you can see that data is already populating. That's not because of combined right now, but then that's because of the other code bit that we have, let's say, on all these bindings, which is there using UI table view delegate. So we are not going to take up table view data source changes right now, because for that we might have to include an external library to work. Let's say if you have worked with RX Swift, then there is something called as RX data sources, which works which at least brings that magic of data binding to table views. So similar thing is available called combined data sources, which is available, built by the same developer, so that we can include, but then I'm just keeping that for a future episode. But then let's focus on the other things today, where bit of other part of the UIKit elements we are going to migrate. So this bit is working right now. I think a similar thing has to even happen for the other bit, which is we did this for CodeDB, and let's also do that for the categories DB. I'm going to make it a similar change over there. I guess we can just copy paste this one because there's no going to be any other change. Category database, I'm just going to bring that here, compile it, and I need to then import combine for that. And then you are going to see a couple of errors which will actually make you change your code. So I need to then bring that over here. Let's move this closer to the init and get that here. I don't need the delegate anymore. Before that, let me get rid of this delegate, as well as I don't need this array database response anymore, so that we don't have any of that reference remaining anywhere. So I got rid of these two delegates protocols right now, and it's gonna give me right away those errors. Clear that. I need to include combine, and then I can just maybe instantiate this one. So I'm just gonna say PassThrough Subject instance created. Now all that I need to do is to change these calls right now to send come on, begin updates, get rid of this, and then database response, send end updates, finally get rid of this, and then database response dot send, insert the index path. I think it's already making sense for you. Hopefully this is how these are the changes which is making this more combined way right now. Combine is bringing you the PassThrough Subject, CurrentValue Subject, and I'm going to also bring in future and some more customization for UIKit, which is a little tricky and interesting to know actually. So it's giving me another error. This category data response was that delegate which we had created. I'm going to delete these begin updates, end updates, and insert calls right now, and then let's get rid of this one. And the other part which I'm going to do right now is to create that same kind of function function extension. So for this categories view model view controller, let's keep it private again, and then let's create a function called setup binding. And then I'm gonna use that database instance dot database response subject. It's the same code, and then maybe I can it's easy to maybe copy paste other bit. It's more or less the same, no difference, because it's again the database and whatever you do is the same. So it's more of reusable part. can maybe bring this in. Again, you can keep it in view controller if your database response structure is going to be the same, but I'm not doing that yet. I'm just going to reuse this part. Bind it, cancelables, we are not defined it, so let's do that. Private let, and then we need import of combine as well. Then private var cancelables can be a set of any cancelable. That does the work for us, and then all that we need to now do is to call the setup binding over here as well. So the other bit is done. So we should be having now the updates happening for categories also getting reflected. Maybe we will check it once all together. So that's also done. So now what do we need to modify? So a couple of things are already moved to the combine way, and now the next part which we are going to move to combine is I'm going to leave these categories as well as the quotes side for future. When I mentioned that we need to move it to data binding using combine on a table view, we might have to bring in combined data sources at that point, but then at this point I'm just going to keep it quotes because there is no change needed, because we are not going to do any kind of different modifications on table view. So other bit which we are going to make reactive right now is the save calls. So for that I am going to bring in something called as a future. So this is something which works like if you are aware of how future works, it works based on futures and promises. So it's something like it at least assures or promises you one responses for. So if you have worked with RX Swift, then there was something called as a single available, but you can relate it more like that, where it is going to at least give you one response for sure. So also for save, we are only interested in getting one response through a promise. So that is what it will work like. You create a future object, you create a use of something called as a promise to send back your response to the other subscribed layer to receive maybe a response or an error. So a promise can end like it sends out one signal or one element to the subscriber, and then it will, as soon as that is done, it's going to call the completed call. So that will terminate the signals from being sent. So it is going to terminate that whole signaling system. Also, if there is an error occurring, then also it's going to terminate that as well. So those are the two instances excuse me, where futures are going to work like that. It's going to send out a single element. So to implement a future, we need to actually have a future is going to accept, similar to the earlier case, the first success condition. I am not expecting after the save any other messages. Maybe I can even say I can have a string which sends me a message of what was the database response, like a message. I can use it to print something. In my example, I had kept it as void to just send out a signal as soon as a void signal as soon as the save is complete. But in this case, maybe I'm going to send a string signal just to see what is the message that you're receiving. And the other part is something the error part, which is the failure part, for which I can actually create an error side, because if, let's say in your case, you are making an API call and then saving to DB or something is happening, then there might be multiple error cases you might have to handle in your case. So it makes sense for you then to create maybe an error enum as well. So I'm just going to bring in an error enum right now. So I'm just going to call it as database error, but then you can even extend it to any other kind of error, so that let's say if it is coming from the server or something, then you can call it as server error, keep separate for a database error and everything. It has to just extend your error and I am just going to call it as save as one condition on which it can maybe fail. So I'm just using that. So that is what I'm going to pass here, the database error. So so this is my save change. I'm going to do it starting with my codes DB. So it's going to give me an error already, where here I don't have anything returned. So I'm just going to make it as future right now for the error, and it's going to be a string response and a database error as the other part. So these are the two variables, and it's already giving me an missing return in this case, because I need to now create a future. So for that, it's very easy. So I just need to, within those two try call, before that I'm just going to need to create an object called future, and then pass a promise. This is my parameter promise, and then I just return this. That's enough, and then I can just maybe completely move all of this code within this future, and also I need to point to the type over here as well. So this is my future, and this is what I'm returning. So it's already giving some errors because I need to pass the context through a closure parameter, and this is going to be an optional, so I need to handle even that. So now this is pretty much okay, but we are not yet done. We still need to use the promise. So let's say as soon as the complete the save has happened, I will call a promise and then pass a success, and it's asking me for a string. So for this I'm going to send save quote is successful as a messages. I'm just going to pass a message so that the other subscriber will know what happened. Now the error case, as soon as it comes to the catch block, I'm going to say promise, and I'm just going to call the failure case, and it needs a database error. So I'm just going to say error save happened, but already I'm maybe if I need to log something, I can use this information from the save error to log it somewhere. But then at least for the other layer, it does not matter what kind of error happened. I'm just sending the kind of error which happened to the other layer. So this is how I use a promise to handle my database response. So this is already done, and it's not giving me any error as said, because even with this change, you anticipate something would have gone wrong, or at least some changes might be needed. So we need to go back and see what is the what has happened right now. So you can see it's saying result of call is unused. So that's the reason. It is not going to work because it's not yet subscribed. It's just calling a save, a regular function, but we are modified into a reactive function. So again, we will have to do response handling here. So we again will have to call a sync. Because it's a string response, if we had, let's say, something like a label to show some error, we could have easily bound it to maybe, but then I can actually assign it. That's the right word. I can assign it to a label. Maybe I can just call that label and assign on maybe to the property, which can be something like a text property of a label or something like that. I could have done this. This is also possible, but then we don't have anything as yet to do that. So I'm just going to sync this response, and I have a error condition as well as a success condition, which is the success message. So I'm just going to print the success. Okay, the other one was anyway success is what I was trying to. I could have assigned that success to a success one, and even the error I can maybe, as soon as I receive an error, I can maybe assign it to any control which is maybe pointing to the error part of it. So it can right away show that error. So this is my error, and it's not yet done. I also need to store this in cancelables. Did I even create that? I don't think so. Let's do that. Private let private var cancelables. It's of a set of any cancelable, and then I need to import combine. So that's my cancelable. I go back and then complete this one. So again, subscription is happening right now, but then you can already see this. Okay, this will work. I'm not sure whether because this one is still holding, and you are actually binding it with an on add quote button tap event is what is carrying this value over here, and on save I'm receiving it and then I'm handling it using. So all of this is happening on success. I can maybe do this navigation popping. Ideally it should happen within this success part. So even that I'm moving right now, because this is the beauty of chained programming, where you know that only on some cases we need to handle it, and we are not relying on the statement by statement whatever was earlier done. Like I was not handling, let's say, what happens after save was a failure. We did not handle that. We could have handled it using a closure or something. I did not do that. I just kept it as a simple save. If it was a closure, then I would have on failure I would not have done the navigation pop part, because we should be in the same screen handling that error case. But now that will happen with this case, because we are syncing the response and receiving an error as well as a success case here. So on success I'm going to pop it out, but this is not the end of this implementation. I still further have to make this button tap as a reactive program in the reactive programming way, which is again going to be interesting, where we start extending, let's say, UI control into the observable types. So that's something which I'll start as soon as this refactoring is done. So you can see this this closures this is only applicable within this function. As soon as the database save is complete, it is going to release this, but then as soon as we move it to the the regular reactive way, end to end, it is going to be look a little different. We will not have this function, the actions to do that. So I think this bit is done. We'll come revisit this part as after we re-implement this part, the UIKit part, the UI control part, or at least the button part. So add quote view controller modification is done. I need to do the similar kind of modification even for categories DB, where I'm going to bring in future even here, and again it's going to be a database response. I'm going to call it string, and the other part is going to be the database error. So again, changes triggered, very easy to handle right now because it's again a future. And I guess I need combine import over here. It's already there. That's fine. It's categories. It's happening in the categories core database string and database error. Let's create a future and a promise, and we are going to move this one inside that future and just return this future. Context needs to be passed, and I guess that's pretty much. And then it's going to give me this save bit where I will have to handle that. I'm going to sync that receive error and completion. So it's going to be an error and success. Let's bring this bit inside. On success, I'm going to pop it out, and then also I need to store cancelables. Similar approach. I don't have a cancelable even here, so private var, and I don't have combine over here. Private var cancelables, set of any cancelable, instantiate that and use that over here. That's it. So this should also start working now, and we can also print this error which is unused right now. Yep, so those things are also handled. So so this bit is done. So we have moved a couple of things right now towards combine, but then we are not yet there. We still need to everything will work as in however it was right now. So I can add a code, go to a category, add a new category called a test category, maybe just to test whether things are working. And then if I save, that save is not triggering, so that means the subscription is not working. Okay, I think this is more of a subscriber getting called multiple times. So I guess we need to even modify this bit before we can see those changes working. So I guess let's get started with extending the UI kit as well. Even before that, let's see, this was working fine earlier. So let's see whether once more whether this is working. What's your combine? Yep, this works fine. Save code is successful. You can see it's giving all the callbacks, but then I guess there is an issue with maybe I'm not calling it the right way, and on the other side future wherever it is right now used. So so this one is working. So let's get started with extending UI control and making it completely, at least end-to-end, the reactive way. So let's get started with that in a bit.